Hi, this is Siofra's Magic, Alcove, and I am Siofra Bradigan. So, I want to talk about hubris, I'm thinking is the word. Um, Ego is part of it. The tendency that we, as magical users and practitioners and so forth, can fall into the habit of thinking everything is about us, um, and how that is not necessarily a good thing. I mean, we're in the process of trying to develop a relationship with the universe, a language with the universe. We're looking for signs, portents, omens, and so forth. We're seeing things that happen around us as some form of communication from the universe. But then sometimes the things that are happening around us have nothing to do with us. And we had this discussion, started this discussion on one of our most recent live shows, the idea that large events are personal. And so I thought it'd be a good idea to delve into the topic and just sort of talk about it in general, um, as well. Because when we're putting together a magical reality, our brains are very associative. We work on the principle that if something is happening, like say in the same hour, even, um, that all these things are related to each other. This is one of the ways that people very uh, get wrong information a lot is by the fact that our brains tend to do this. For example, people who believe that a flu vaccine gives them the flu because they got the vaccine one day and then they got what they thought was the flu. And these two things seem to be related because they happened at the same time. When the reality of that particular situation is that vaccines don't start to work for a couple of weeks until after you get them. You don't get sick until anywhere from a few days to 10 days after you're exposed. And so the coincidence in this case is someone got exposed to the flu before they got their flu vaccine. And it just happened that the day they got their flu vaccine or shortly thereafter was when they came down with the flu. But you can't convince them otherwise because they know that they're right. Because these two things happened at the same time. That's what I'm talking about, is the unwillingness to look at the actual facts of how things work and so forth in order to put things into perspective, because now they've determined that flu shots are bad and they'll never get another one for the rest of their lives. Hopefully they won't catch the flu and die. It can happen. And maybe they'll be lucky and they have a good immune system and it won't. But that means that they're making a decision based on bad information or incorrect association. That's what this is about, incorrect associations. So, we also know that our perception is based upon what we choose to pay attention to. So, in the room, in our temple where I am sitting, there's a lot of different things I could look at and pay attention to, or I could ignore all of it. But depending on what I choose, the reason my room, our temple is the way it is because I've picked the associations that I pay attention to. Like everything on every altar means something to me. In my brain, that associates that altar, for example, with water. The cup I have, the personal relationship with the peacock that I saw in my astral temple that's there, the painted angel with the fount, that's a fountain kind of thing, the candle holder that my son gave me that I painted in blues and things to represent the water, the color blue that I feel represents water. All of those things are things that I've chosen to associate with that element. So we have to be careful of what we choose to associate, because if, say, I associated the color blue with like depression and negativity, um, or the idea of the blues and etc. And certainly water has that potential as an element to be that. But if I focus just on the negative aspects of water, then seeing that altar would fill me with dread and foreboding and concern and worry and anxiety, because I would be seeing all of the negative aspects of water represented there. The cup that, doesn't have, the water doesn't have its own shape, so how can you control it? You're taking charge by putting it in the cup, but maybe that's not enough. You can still get out. I don't know. I'm just, spitting here, haha, with water. And, but just talking about how the same thing, exactly the same items, could have a completely different meaning, feeling, and association to someone else. Someone else looking at this would think, oh my God, there's a witch in this room. And if she's a powerful witch, what might she do to me? Because I've been a bad person and I think I deserve to be punished. I don't know. Anything is possible. So that's the point, is that when we start walking on a magical path, we're the ones who have to choose exactly what path we're going to follow and how we're going to follow it, what associations we're going to create in our own mind, in our own reality. So if we think someone else is powerful and is attacking us, and then anything negative happens around us, we say in our head that that person did that to us. And they may have nothing to do with each other, just like the vaccine shot and the flu happening. They may just be coincidental, but because it's our brain and our mind and our reality, and we choose to focus on that, and then we determine that this is the truth, and then we act on that as our reality, whether it's true or not. And it's like, it's a very tricky kind of thing, because we all have that happen to us. I mean, some point during our path, we're going to jump to a conclusion that this thing is related to that thing and be wrong, because we're human and we make mistakes. Which is why trying to keep a clear head about us is important. So when I see something like that, I look at that and I think, how does that affect me? So say I know a witch who's mad at me, and I know that they like to do dark magic, because, I know them well enough to know that. So I know that they're out there doing their thing to try and, make my life miserable. And my car breaks down. And I could decide that this was their working that they did to interfere with my day, not that my part was getting old and needed to be replaced. Or I could say, this has nothing to do with them. This is just what's happening to me in my life. Because to say to myself that they have succeeded in harming me using magic tells me that I have no power. And that's the question. What kind of power do you want to have? What is your power? Is your power to cower in fear in the middle of your house, thinking that everybody's against you? That doesn't sound like power to me. That is giving your power over to invisible forces and other people and saying that everything out there is more powerful than I am. And I won't accept that. Maybe that's another form of hubris. But it's my reality and I'm going to be in charge of it. And I'm determined when it comes to that. So if the things that you are thinking take away your power, you're thinking wrong. There's something not working right in your mind, in your mindset, in your brain, in your understanding of magical reality and your purpose, because that's not how this is supposed to work. The whole point of being a witch and walking a magical path is to take charge and to be in control of your path, your responsibility, your power. And, we give people power over us in ordinary, everyday reality on a regular basis. We have many examples of that I'm sure we can all think of. Just, we live in a power over society, so there's always that sense that someone else has control over our lives on some level that we can't do anything about. But if we give people the power to interfere with us on that kind of deep spiritual, emotional level, that is harming us, not them. And it's not actually empowering them either, because they may not even know they're doing it. It could be just happening in our head. So that is one thing to think about when you're having and anxiety about something going on in your life, and what does it mean? It means what you choose it to mean. I met a woman online one day that was absolutely terrified because she'd seen a crow. And she had made an agreement with crows, so she thought, that they would leave her alone and she would leave them alone. And when this agreement in her mind was broken, I don't think the crows were informed of this. She assumed that meant her death. And we know that people can think themselves to death. I don't know if she died, because, you know, that was just one little conversation that I saw years ago in a group. And I'm just like, why are you choosing to be afraid of a crow? They're the most common bird on the planet. Or all the corvids. Almost any bird you see, like you know, probably 6 out of 10 birds you see are going to be a corvid. I mean, they're like all kinds of different bird species are corvids. But that's because she decided in her head that that was a bad omen, and so when it happened, it had a bad result. This is all in her head. This is not in reality. That's what I'm saying. It's like we have to be careful what we choose to believe. So then we get to larger things. I think that culture, religion, spirituality, a lot of stuff, we have this idea that the universe is set up in such a way that if we're a good person, only good things happen to us, which is a crock. That's not true at all. That has nothing to do with actual reality. That's a fantasy that we create in our heads to be able to look at our lives, to decide whether or not they've been a life worth living, and if we are worth existing. It's sort of a way of judging ourselves and deciding, is this an okay life that I'm having right now? Because things are going well, that means I must be doing the right thing. And these, again, the brain, these two correlations have nothing to do with one another. Life just sort of happens. And although you may have a really good relationship with the universe, and you may be able to see stuff coming and arrange yourself and, you know, get better things for yourself, doesn't mean you can't work, you don't have to work for it or pay attention to it. It's not automatic. You have to put in the energy to get the energy out. So the idea that the universe is just, all of the universe is this giant reflection of our inner reality and our inner sense of worth is a bad idea, in my opinion. Because, for one thing, there's 7.5 billion of us on this planet right now that are alive. And every single one of them is the center of their own universe. We are all the center of our own universe. You're not the only center of the universe. The universe is vast. And we're not the only planet in the universe, if we want to get into that. It's like, yeah, there's so much out there that we still think we're the center of the universe is kind of laughable. And it makes me think about when, you know, religion freaked out when the scientist says, hey, we're going around the sun, not the other way around. And that was basically what that was about. No, we are the center of the universe. That means the universe revolves around us entirely. And they weren't willing to accept that, and they started killing people right and left and putting them in jail and everything else because they dared to say such a terrible thing that would interfere with their version of the universe and how it works, instead of going like, wow, that's interesting information. So as a species, we apparently still have a lot of that in us. And you know, when we're children, we are the center of the universe. As we grow up, we start to hopefully realize that there are other centers of the universe that we're encountering, and we revolve around each other from time to time, or we decide to stay in an orbit with another person for a longer period of time and have a long-standing relationship with them, or we don't, and we move on to another universe. You know, it's like, yes, you are the center of your universe, but you are not the only center of the universe. Something to remember, especially when things don't go your way. And when we take everything the universe does personally, it doesn't help us. So when I was in Santa Cruz, I went through the 7.1 Loma Prieta earthquake. It was a horrific experience. I do not recommend going through earthquakes. I'm sorry for anyone who has had to go through one. They are the most disturbing, unsettling thing I've ever experienced. Weirdly enough, I used to dream about it happening when I was a kid before I ever was in an earthquake, but who knows if that was prescience or past life memory or just anxiety. Anything is possible. So I felt personally offended by all the aftershocks. The first earthquake happened so fast and was so shocking, there wasn't really much I could think at the time. But the aftershocks, they kept coming. We had like a couple of thousand aftershocks in the first 3 days after the major event. And I actually had a total temper tantrum. I completely melted down. I threw myself on the floor in the middle of one of these events and started pounding my fists and my feet on the floor, screaming, "Stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it, stop it." And guess what? It didn't stop. It wasn't listening to me at all. It didn't care how I felt about it. It didn't care if I liked it or didn't like it. I had nothing whatsoever to do with it. I was crushed. I was like, why are you treating me like this? I've always been nice to you. I've tried to be nice to the earth. I've tried to be, a helpful steward and stuff like that. And then you do this to me. Earth didn't care, had nothing to do with me. The nature of earthquakes is such that without them we wouldn't have life. They're just a part of existence, and they're not personal. And that goes true for everything else. That goes through for storms and wind and floods and fires and any volcanic eruptions. All of those things are natural processes of the planet we happen to be inhabiting, and they would happen whether we were on it or not. Although weather changes may be our fault. So some of those may not have been happening quite the way they are now, but they still would be happening. I mean, there's always been tornadoes and hurricanes and floods and fires and earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. It's like, it's just part of being on a living earth. And thank goodness it's not dead. So this is a good thing. But if we make it personal, let's say, you can lose hope if you make it all personal. You think the universe is against you. Babylon 5 had this character, he was a ranger, and I really liked what he had to say about the universe and fairness, because the universe is not fair. And his character said that he used to rail against the unfairness of the universe because, that meant good people had terrible things happen to them, and that was just strictly unfair. But then he thought about it a little bit more, and then he realized that it was a good thing that the universe was unfair. Because if the universe was fair, that would mean all the terrible things that happened to good people meant they actually deserved it. Something to think about. And I was just like, that's it right there. It's okay that the universe is not fair. We don't have to have it be fair. We live in a living process that's constantly changing. There is zero stability. Everything is always in motion. The molecules and atoms in your body are constantly moving. Nothing stands still. Everything is constantly changing, in flux, becoming something else, moving somewhere else, doing something else. And it's not personal. Which is the biggest thing. Remember, it's not personal. So the hubris factor comes in when we begin to believe that we are that important, that the universe is paying that much attention to us, and that it is personal. So when we find ourselves thinking that that earthquake was because I was bad, I did something wrong, I'm being punished for something, then we need to go into therapy or something, because it's not the truth. And it leads us down like a really dark negative spiral into ourselves, and then we're focusing on the wrong things. Then we're looking for things that are wrong. When Ian and I went to Maui, and we went out into the ocean and got caught in 20-foot surf and almost drowned coming in, it was a very interesting experience for me personally, because I was very aware of the whole process while it was happening, trying to stay calm and relaxed so I didn't break my neck, which was close. Taking a breath and holding the oxygen in my lungs so that I didn't drown and so forth. and then coming up in between these very fast waves where I had about 10 seconds before the next one hit, and almost not making it out. The one thing I got very clearly while that was happening was the ocean didn't know I was there. It didn't care. It had nothing to do with me. I was in the wrong place at the wrong time. That was on me. I shouldn't have gone in. It was a bad idea. Almost cost me my life. Would have been quite the lesson. Was a lesson anyway. Thank goodness I survived it. But it wasn't personal. The ocean forces grinding everything it found into stone, into sand, into tiny bits. That's what it does. That's its purpose, is to move all those things around and to grind them down. And I was just one more thing it was trying to grind down. So not taking it personally is a good thing, because that allowed me to move forward from that, knowing it wasn't personal. That sort of was the final piece, I think, in my conscious, subconscious dynamic or whatever. It's like, it took a while for me to accept that the earthquake wasn't personal, because I very much felt it was at the time. And then this, and it's like, okay, it's really not personal. It's got nothing to do with me. On the other side of that, developing a relationship with the universe and a method of communication, things can become personal in the fact that you're paying attention to what's going on around you. It's still, the universe is like this mass of energy without necessarily focus or thought. You are the focus and the thought. You are the one that impact which way the universal energies flow, by what you attract, by what you pull in, by what you put out, and it's all on you. It's like, if you want to live a life full of fear and anxiety and feel that everyone's against you and trying to harm you, that's going to be your life. That's the way that works. If you want to be a powerful, magical practitioner, realize that it's not personal, it has nothing to do with you, it's just what everyone else has to go through, and you're not alone in this, everybody has to go through crap, then you have a chance of getting out of that energy vortex. And I really see a lot of that kind of stuff like that. It's like, once you get on a downward spiral, if things start to go downhill in your mind, whether they're real or not doesn't matter, but they start to go downhill in your mind, if you can catch it before it makes a full turn on around, then you have a chance of reversing it and then going up into an upward spiral, at least staying even while you're waiting for whatever the situation is that's trying to pull you down to stop, so then you can move forward. And it's not necessarily easy to do that. I know that from personal experience, but it's something to be aware of. If you notice you're having dark thoughts, you're having thoughts that life is against you, people are against you, the universe is against you, these are signs that you're going into a downward spiral that's not going to be helpful at all. So you have to be proactive and take care of yourself, because no one's going to take care of you but you. You really are the only one who can do this. You can get help, but you have to go and ask for it. There's resources available, but you have to let them know you need them. I mean, it really all comes down to each individual figuring this out and doing it, which is, again, unfair, but there's the universe, right? It's not fair. So, things that affect large groups of people are clearly not personal, although they impact you on a very personal level. And the trick is to understanding the difference between those two things. Just because you are negatively impacted by a large event, be it a flood, a storm, a fire, an earthquake, a tornado, whatever it happens to be, just because you are negatively impacted by the event doesn't mean it's personal. You have to deal with the negative consequences of how that impacted you and figure out what to do about it. Are you going to, after a fire and you've lost everything you own, like some people are having happen and have happened in the last few years, where entire towns have burned to the ground, how are you going to respond to that? What are you going to do about it? Are you going to rebuild? Are you going to move somewhere else? Are you going to chuck it all and say, I don't care? You know, there's any number of possibilities. It's like the future opens up with all these different pathways, and you are the one who decides which path you're going to take by the choices that you make. Every time you make a decision and a choice, you're putting your foot on a path going in that direction. And if you don't like the place the path is leading, you have to change paths. You have to move yourself off that path and be on a different track. Easy to say, I know, not always easy to do. And you know from my videos in the past and my experiences and so forth that I've had, I have not had an easy life. If I wanted to take stuff personally, I have got a whole bucket, maybe a swimming pool full of stuff that I could pull out and say, look how the universe has treated me, look how the universe is against me. It put me in a family with horrible people. It put me in a family with someone who wanted to torture me and abuse me. But then again, we have that other side where everybody has to blame themselves for everything that's going on. And then it's like, I did a horrible thing in a past life. It must be my fault. Somehow I brought this on myself. Neither option. It's like, it's just what was. And my personal attitude is if I can learn something positive from a negative experience, I've turned it into something that works for me, something I can move forward from, and something I can take with into the future to make a more positive impact on myself and the people around me. So if you meet somebody out there who thinks that they know all the answers, we've talked about this before, then you know that they have an ego that won't stop and there's something wrong with what they're doing. Because no one has all the answers. Each one of us is on this path alone. We can help each other along the way, not throw stones at one another as we're trying to figure things out. Give a helping hand where we can and where our energy allows, but we're not required to. And but know that we're in it alone. You are the ultimate arbiter of your conscience and your actions. People can't make you do something you don't want to. Even if you're in a situation where you think you don't have any choice, you have to forgive yourself if that happens. If it's a survival tactic, that's what it is. And surviving is the only way to have a path forward. You do what you have to do, but how you respond to that later, what you do with that in the future, that's all on you. That's your input. Since we all live in bodies that have different ailments and limitations and so forth, working within those and understanding who we are is important as well. You know, we need to know what we need to survive or to prosper, not just to survive. So if you know you're allergic to something and it's bad for you, don't eat it or take it or drink it or whatever, because then you're telling yourself you're not worthy and you know that causes your own problems. So, you know, think about what the things you do and allow mean in the overall picture about how you're in the universe and what that is, what that's about. Choose a better life, a better path, a path of power, personal responsibility, a path of kindness and gratitude and generosity. You know, it's like you can choose those things. They can take time to get used to. And like we've said before, the universe, the energy of the universe is just sort of this blank slate kind of thing that you are creating around you. And so if you created a lot of negative stuff around you because of how you think or your associations or wrong information that you may have had or bad experiences that you've been going through, it doesn't happen instantaneously. It's not like a eureka moment where all of a sudden, bam, everything's now going to be on path and everything's great. It's a process. Like living is a process, like weather is a process, like cycles of the planet are a process. Everything is a process. It goes from one state to another, but slowly. There's incremental steps in the meantime. So, yeah, nothing like about this is going to be easy. It's not about that. So, okay, that's probably enough on that subject, I think. if you have questions, please feel free. And as you know, usual, you can contact me on email at siofrasmagicalcove@gmail.com. You can friend me on Facebook at Siofra Bradigan. You can send me a message. You can become a patron if you want to support what we're trying to do here, which is just sort of spread good information if we can, and be supportive of the magical community as we can, and or become a member of our YouTube channel and support us that way, which is a small amount. We haven't gone big with anything like that. We're not like one of those sales channels or anything. We're just us. We're not professional actors. We don't have a professional studio. Just us doing our thing and trying to spread accurate information where possible, or at least our own personal insights, whether they're accurate or not. You could decide. So anyway, this has been Siofra's Magic Alcove, and I'm Siofra Bradigan. Blessed be.